Hello, I'm Louise Chunn from Welldoing, and I'm here today to speak to Julia Samuel, who's a grief counsellor and an author of two terrific books, Grief Works and This Too Shall Pass. And I'm talking to her just after Grief Awareness Week. So hi, Julia. We've spoken quite a number of times over the years and met in person in the times when we could. Yes. But I wanted to start today by saying, how do you think we're coping with grief during the pandemic?
I mean, I think any difficulty anyone is experiencing, and it could be grief from death, or it could be grief from a living loss, like losing your job or getting a health diagnosis or your marriage breaking down or whatever it is. I think everything is made worse. I think this sort of external environment of uncertainty, of everyone around you feeling quite anxious and kind of worried about what the future holds and what you can actually do today and what you might be able to do tomorrow. Plus, the most important thing that in the past, until a few months ago, where connection when you're suffering is probably the single most important aspect that gives you good outcomes, is love and connection to other people. And of course, having to isolate and not seeing people when you're really missing someone you love and not having people around you who love you is devastating. So I think it's amped it up on every level for everybody.
So we used to talk about grief as when somebody had, a death in the family or friends, but now you could say that you're grieving because your last year of secondary school was missed out, or you didn't get the wedding you wanted, or you haven't seen your parents or children for months, possibly
years. I know people who haven't seen their parents for 2 years, who haven't met their grandchildren for 2 years. That is definitely a huge loss, that you're not part of your most significant people lives, that everything you've pictured as your children growing up of being a kind of active grandmother, and you can't see them because they're, say, maybe in Australia and they can't get here, wherever the country is, but they can't cross the boundaries, as it were, the borders. So yeah, I think it's made it more complex, and grief is difficult anyway. And grief, I think we're talking about now at Christmas, is always difficult, because the times in the past that have been happy, kind of memorable times, are particularly painful times when you're really missing the person that you love. Because, we normally have Christmas in the same place, and we have all our traditions and rituals and the smells. And of course, in that kind of mind-body, the body remembers connection, you get these huge kind of surges of memory of a hug under the mistletoe, or the smell of a mince pie, and everyone kind of laughing around the dining room table or the kitchen table. And there is this kind of incredibly intense presence of absence of the person that you love. So it's a really difficult.
Made much more difficult by COVID.
It's made more difficult by COVID because, say, about Christmas, the thing I've been saying for the last few weeks is you need to kind of, as a family where someone has died, all of you may have different responses to what you need and what you want to do. It might be that one of you wants to do the same Christmas because you always love Christmas together, and your sibling might say, don't be ridiculous, we can't do Christmas because we loved it so much. And so my kind of message is that you need to sit down together and make a plan of what you can do, and hopefully negotiate so that you kind of get your needs met, or agree to do something very different separately this year. But you can't plan at the moment. It's impossible to make a plan.
Do you have practical, that's a practical idea. Do you have other practical ideas for people who feel that they should be feeling better than this? They may not have had COVID, they may have done everything they can, and actually they may well continue to say, well, it's not a war, we're all fine, but they wake up and they feel low. They don't seem to enjoy the things that they used to enjoy before.
And I think there is a sense, I think the first thing is that you feel what you feel. So give yourself permission to feel what you feel. And what really helps is if you can name it, because emotions and cognitions are reciprocal, is a reciprocal pathway. So if you block what you're feeling, telling yourself you're being stupid and making a fuss, you just push it down, you kind of cut off your connection with yourself, that cuts off your connection with other people, and you just keep it static and stuck. Whereas if you can name that you wake up and you feel kind of just grey and a bit bleh, but you can't give it a concrete reason, just say to yourself, oh, I'm feeling bleh. And then think about, okay, so what does that feel like? It means I feel a bit like I have low energy. I feel I don't really feel very optimistic. But maybe I can choose to do things that can meet that, where I will have a better day given I feel bleh. So that maybe make sure that you go for a walk. Even if you go outside in the pouring rain for 20 minutes, you will feel better. Maybe write down what you feel in a journal, like putting your thoughts on a page is, evidence-based research shows it is as therapeutic as speaking to a therapist. And then do something that intentionally gives you a little spark of pleasure or joy. So it may be go and buy yourself, some nice flowers, make sure you have a very nice scented bath, if that's the sort of thing you like, make yourself a delicious hot chocolate, give yourself a treat, or listen to music. I tend to watch things that are funny because that really just switches my mood. Yeah. And the biggest thing, of course, which isn't always available to everybody, is the connection to somebody else. So kind of go through in your head who you could have a 20-minute chat with while you're out on your walk. You can have your earphones in and just be chatting to someone over their lunch hour, your lunch hour. And you just feel better when you've done active things. It shifts the energy in your body. It opens you up. Whereas if you don't name it and you don't make a plan to do anything, you just kind of lower yourself and you sit and you don't get out of your pajamas, or you just put on a trackie and you drink lots of coffee and you just get lower and lower and lower. And then, of course, we're habit-making beings. We're born to be habitual because it's less psychological cost. So then you might do that the next day, and then you can build yourself into really quite a dark place. So even doing what we know from research is doing even 5 minutes of a good habit of doing 5-minute meditation, 5-minute yoga with Adrienne on YouTube, 5 minutes of watching something funny shifts you and has a much bigger outcome than the time it takes. And I think when we're low, we often think, well, nothing is going to work, nothing's going to make any difference. But actually, small things that are within our power can make a difference. And I think the big thing to kind of recognize when we're in an environment which we may be grieving all these multiple losses as well as death, and we have no control over, the Omicron now or whatever's going on in the external world, the only counter you have to that is engaging with your own agency and connection of what you can make a difference with. So the first arrow is the bad thing that happens. The second arrow is what you do with the bad that's happened to you. And if you double down on self-care, double down on connection with others, even if it's virtual, double down on giving yourself sparks of joy and movement and shifting, that will mean that you have more resilience, more robustness, and you will basically fare better.
That all sounds very wise, Julia. Now, what about unwise things? What should we avoid?
Well, I mean, I think of course you want to have fun and drink and eat and do fun things. But, masses of alcohol, like starting early and drinking late, is a depressant. It means you don't sleep well. You wake up with sugar absolutely playing havoc on your kind of, your digestion. And you wake up with a headache, you wake in a low mood, you have a little bit of self-loathing or kind of yuck. And so, I'm not saying don't have a party and don't drink, but drinking a lot, you will definitely feel worse. And the same, food and mood, there are nice psychiatrists who will give you a diet for your nutrition. There's nutritional psychiatrists. The more we know about our biome and that our serotonin, which is our neurotransmitter for positive mood, 90% of it is made in our biome. So everything that we put in our biome, in our stomach, in other words, has an effect on our mood. So if you eat lots of unprocessed food and drink lots of fizzy drinks, that will inevitably affect your mood, because it feeds your biome the negative things that give you a bad microbiome and less serotonin, which is the positive neurotransmitter.
So we should educate ourselves about what foods are better for us than what food and drink are better for us.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's important not to kind of deny us any foods and not to live in a kind of police state, because then I think that makes you binge and bust type behaviors. But I do think, having a broad spectrum, a balance as much as you can. If you balance what you eat and how you move, what you watch, who you see, and how you behave, your whole system is more naturally regulated. If you behave in a kind of roller coastery type way with what you eat and drink and watch and who you see and how you behave, you will have a roller coastery system. And given that the externals are, crazy making, the more we can regulate ourselves in the face of that, then we connect better with ourselves. We feel safe in our mind, safe in our body. And when we feel safe, we make better decisions and we feel more robust, and kind of have agency in the world. When we kind of can't really rely on ourselves and disconnect from ourselves, we often make terrible decisions, and that has then obviously bad outcomes.
I also wanted to know if you thought that, dealing with loss in your life as we are at the moment, whether you think people are more likely to be angry or sad, and whether there's a preferable way of looking at things.
Well, I mean, anger is often an expression of hurt, like, "Oh, you're hurting me." And it's a wired evolutionary response when you feel under threat. And so it's an important natural response that we have. And sadness, again, is an important natural response that we have when we feel upset and distressed, and that crying, for instance, releases a hormone that kind of calms you down. So these are very important physiological patterns and emotional responses in the face of difficulties. So there isn't a worse or a better. I think it's recognizing your own responses, and that all of us, from what we learned in our childhood, will have a default response. So you will have ways of behaving that you automatically feel when bad things happen. So you may automatically get furious. You may automatically shut down. You may automatically get terrified. And you can't not have that response. But what's useful is to have the awareness of, like, I go from 0 to 100 when bad things happened, when I feel threatened. And now what can I do to make sure that I don't then scream at someone who, say, for instance, my employer, who might sack me? So that, you can do something like go for a run or kick a ball or kickbox or something that will release the anger, do self-soothing, calming things, So then you can think, okay, so I am upset about this and that has annoyed me. And now what is an assertive, useful way of expressing that rather than your first response, which is to kind of blast off?
I wondered whether you have any ideas about ways of looking at, when you come to the end of the year, you reassess the year. When you come to the beginning of the next one tends to plan things or have, resolutions or whatever, thoughts about it. Do you think that there's anything that you could encourage people to be thinking as they come to that point where they're going over into a different year, and a way to help boost them or protect them in some way?
I mean, I think, in some ways these are artificial lines, aren't they? But they're also, I think, an important time to have reflection, as you say. And so I think maybe one of the things, rather than having resolutions, which can often feel a bit punishing, we want to imbue ourselves with hope. Hope is the alchemy that turns a life around. And hope isn't just a feeling, although it helps. It is also a plan A and a plan B, which is a kind of realistic plan that you can make happen. And so I would do a two-hander. I would look back at the year that you've had, kind of go through your diary, talk with your family or your friends around the kitchen table about what's happened in the last year, what's been difficult, what have you learned, what are you grateful for, what are the good things of the year. And by examining what your experience of the year has been, which for most people at some levels has been difficult, but maybe there have been moments of joy that you kind of get lost in the kind of worry of the present that you're in. So really kind of look at what the things and be aware of what you're grateful for. And then having learned from that, what do you want more of next year? What could you do to protect yourself from maybe the holes that you fell in this year? And what can you choose to do more of that will give you moments of joy or have something to look forward to or give you hope? And again, they have to be realistic. So it probably isn't huge holidays when we still don't know about. I mean, I feel so sorry for the travel industry, but, make things that feel pragmatically realistic.
That's very good advice, Julia. Also, I just wanted to ask you very briefly about your app. Would you tell us a bit about it?
So 2 years ago, a company approached me wanting to convert my book, Grief Works, into an app. And they have done the most amazing job. So it is more than an app. It's like therapy. It's a 28-day course. And every day on that 28 days, and you wouldn't do it every day, you'd probably do it every 3 days, there is a wisdom. So there's a part of grieving that I know is true, like pain is the agent of change. And then there's a practice, an active thing that goes with it. And then there is like 30 tools that can help self-regulate you when you feel when you wake up at 4 a.m, kind of feeling terrified or furious or whatever it is. So there's visualization, sleep meditations, yoga classes, HIIT classes, all of those things. And then there's a journal that you can write in every day. And then there's a reflective tool where you can say how your day has been and what you're grateful for at the beginning, at the end of every day. And there are little films with me all the way through. So it doesn't feel like a robot. And I mean, it's had 200 5-star reviews. We've had thousands and thousands of downloads, and everyone that uses it, there was a guy the other day that said, I've been struggling with my grief for 3 years, and in 10 days, I feel better. So they feel like it's like therapy, but it's in their pocket.
Yeah.
And I've recommended people to use it between therapy sessions. Yeah. So therapists recommend it to use, and it can be part of the therapy of what's been going on and support them in between the sessions. but also if you're on the wait list, because some of these wait lists are 6 or 8 weeks long, to use it to keep you going. So my underlying belief is that grieving is an active process, and that how we find ways of expressing the pain of it, how we come to terms with the loss of this person, how we continue the relationship with them despite the reality that they've died, and how we turn towards ourselves with compassion and kindness, and find ways of connecting with people around us. Those are the vital things that all of us need to engage in when we're grieving. And the app does all of that with you and for you.
Oh, that sounds great. Well done on
Thank you.
doing that. So it's lovely speaking to you, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas.
I hope so too. And you, Louise, and everyone that's listening and watching. I wish you all to have as good a Christmas and New Year as you can possibly have.